You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT, Fort Wayne, Radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in the show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
Hello and welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour. As usual, this show is put together by members of FreeThought Fort Wayne, a chapter of the American Humanist Association. To check out our group, you can visit us at facebook.com/FreeThoughtFW. We have a new website, freethoughtfw.org, or you can email us at fortwayneaha@gmail.com. Have an interesting show today. I think the topic is going to be very exciting and lively. We're going to try to predict the future. We're going to try to predict how things are going to look 20 years from now, in various different ways. And, I certainly did some research, and, I've got my crystal ball prepped and ready to ask it questions. And today on the show, as usual, we have our sound engineer, Andrew. We have Caleb. We have Chris and myself, V. So what do you guys think? Are we ready to discuss the future?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yep. Future is now.
All right. So
And
where
now,
should we start?
And now?
There's so much to cover, and just before the show, I guess we'll just continue the conversation that I started. I've recently dabbled into some virtual reality, and I think it's great. I think it has huge potential. Has anyone else tried anything, any VR goggles, any VR experiences, anything like that?
Just one. My brother got one it's like one of those goggles you put on your phone, and he had this game on it where you essentially control an army on a virtual playing board. That's basically it. I wish I could make that sound more exciting for you guys, but it's hard to describe. I mean, it's just one of those things you really have to experience for yourself, because it was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It was really wild. But again, I've only really ever experienced the more rudimentary versions of VR. I haven't experienced anything in high def or any of the elite programs.
Right.
But I thought it was awesome. Definitely worth investing into, I think.
Chris, have you tried anything like that?
Yeah, so I have tried the Samsung Gear VR that you were mentioning earlier, which utilized most recently because of the fact that I'm an Alien fan, and Alien Covenant came out recently, and they released a VR trailer of sorts where you got to be an alien after it chest bursted out of an unfortunate victim.
Oh, wow.
So that was actually that was pretty wild. I'll give it that. That was the most intense VR experience I've had.
Wow.
Really creative
awesome.
too.
Yeah, it was. That was intense. So if you ever have a chance to sit down with the Gear VR, definitely look up the Alien Covenant thing for that, because that's really cool.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. One of the things about these virtual reality goggles, especially like the Gear VR, is and there's other models out there that are probably similarly good, is how cheap they are. The Gear VR is only about just over $100, and you can probably get them for even less than that for some of the off brands. And I think just the experience of it, I've only had it for a couple of days, so maybe I've played around with it for 2-3 hours total. There were so many different things that you can do on it. From just playing a simple YouTube video It's like you're in your own private movie theater. There's this giant screen in front of you, and your entire field of view is that screen, just like as if you're, in a big movie theater. There was some games that I played. There were some videos, kind of like what you were saying with the um, Alien, but this one was where you're on stage at a theater show, and you're kind of moving around the actors as they're acting out the show, and you can look around and see what different people are doing, and
So
it's
do you
really
think? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
immersive.
I kind of thought of a question here. Since we're talking about the future here, do you think that perhaps movie theaters might start offering the VR experience to compete? I mean, if you can have your own theater experience at home, why go to a theater?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Uh, the technology is going to evolve, obviously, in the next 20 years. It won't be those kind of VR goggles. They're heavy, they're bulky, they're all this. So one way or another, it'll change. It'll be something different. But yeah, I think these VR goggles are basically going to eliminate, to a large extent, movie theaters. Or movie theaters will morph into an even more immersive experience where maybe the floor will shake or move or do various things as you're watching the movie, so you have the sensory experience as well as the visual experience, and that's just scratching the surface in terms of what these things can do. And entertainment is certainly a big part of it, yeah, but it's going to progress to well beyond that. One thing that I was thinking about is just in terms of education. A lot of people homeschool their kids. Um, maybe they live in a remote area, or maybe they want to go to a better school. Well, you can run 90% of, let's say, experiments that are done in high school in your science classes. You can run all those virtually, in a virtual world with virtual flasks and virtual stopwatches and virtual pendulums and virtual instruments, where you'll be able to see your hands moving around and setting up your experiment and making the measurements just as if you're doing it for real. And I think that'll transform education.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that VR will eventually replace any skilled training of any kind, surgery, craft, pretty much like anything craftsman that might put yourself or someone else in actual danger. I mean, who knows? Cadavers, for example, might, when they dissect them in schools. I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it is, but it's possible those could be a thing of the past. With technology like this, there's really no point in having a real body other than to have the actual experience. But don't get me wrong. I take that back, actually. I don't think you can become a doctor or a surgeon without practicing on the real thing, come to think of it. So,
well, that's probably true. But imagine, sometimes in high school you dissect a frog. You won't have to kill a frog ever again to do that. Or you won't have to preserve it in anything. You'll pull out your virtual scalpel on your virtual lab bench, and you're going to cut your virtual animal there, and you're going to explore its virtual organs, and they're going to be just like real. Now, you won't be able to touch it probably or feel it, but just the visual of what it is and what it looks like and all that is probably completely sufficient.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I talked, oh gosh, when was it? A while ago. I had discussed something called the God helmet. And the creator of the God helmet is trying to refine this technology. And his ultimate goal is to be able to manipulate sensory perception through electronic device. So in theory, for example, you could produce a heightened sense of awareness or fear, anxiety, happiness, love, the sensation of falling, so forth, etc. And I'm not sure if it's possible to take this to the extreme to, to be able to feel a frog's skin, for example, in a virtual reality experience. But I think it's possible, definitely possible. But I don't know. I feel like I wonder if it would be worth it to make that sort of journey in the grand scheme of things. I mean, do you feel that the virtual reality experience, at least so far as the educational avenue, this in particular, we were just talking about dissecting animals, do you think that actually takes away from that experience, or do you think that it has the potential to add, or really doesn't change anything?
It probably does take away something. It's one thing to do something that's not real. It's another thing to do it when it is real. Obviously, it's kind of a tautology there. But I mean, how much of value do you really add when you touch that frog heart or lungs, instead of just pulling it out and being able to, put it up and rotate it from every side? And
well, I could argue, for example, for me personally, and what I would say is the actual experience of going through this process is one of the things that solidified the memory in my head. I vividly remember dissecting the frogs and the worms and the cow eyes in school. But before we ever did that, we were learning about the anatomy of these things. So we learned them in a book first, and I don't remember any of that stuff. But I do remember dissecting the eyeball. That was an amazing experience. You have the smells, the formaldehyde, you have the sensations, you have the that, I don't know, kind of teenager impulse to see what's in there, to feel it with your own hands and smell it. And I thought the experience was powerful enough that it warranted going through that process, period. And I wonder, I personally don't think that unless we can come up with a virtual experience where you can have that, you can have the smell, you can have the taste, which I think we would have to go through a period where it didn't exist, where we just did the VR experience, and kind of as the technology grows, eventually we would get to that point. But I think that from A to B, once we get that, from A to C, I think that B point where everything's VR, if it ever came to that, I honestly think that those people would be missing out, in my opinion. But in the grand scheme, like I said, if the technology develops to that extent where you can feel it, see it, taste it, whatever, I think it would definitely be worth it in the long run.
And you may be right. I mean, I never got to experience that in high school. We didn't have those kind of labs. Like, we definitely had the chemistry labs and the physics labs, but we didn't really have a biology lab. And I guess, for those, I feel like, for example, imagine more of a chemistry type setting, I guess. It could be a lot safer if you have the students making some type of experiment where they couldn't mix the wrong chemicals, they couldn't get hurt, they couldn't burn themselves, and you can argue that that's part of the experience, getting burnt on a Bunsen burner or something, and learn that, okay, flame hot, but I don't know. I think it'll be worth it. I think it'll be worth it.
Okay. Well,
and certainly for example, at least for kids that are in places where they don't have the resources to run these kind of labs, maybe, or people that are in remote locations or in rural areas, or I think they can benefit from that kind of technology, where they wouldn't be able to run those experiments at all, maybe.
Yeah, that's an excellent point right there. That's beautiful. I love that. I mean, just think about it. I mean, when I was going to high school, we had a teacher. His name was, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. Am I allowed to say names real quick? I'm going to mark this time. 19 minutes, 35 seconds. Are we allowed to say names of people that aren't necessarily aware that they're in the show?
Well, you can probably just go by first name. It's probably fine.
All right. All right, I'll just call him Mr. M then. All right, I'm going to go ahead and zoom. So 1935 to 20. Okay. I had a teacher in high school. I'll refer to him as Mr. M. He was actually from Africa, moved to the States, immigrated, became fully American, and he retired early so that he could go back to Africa and build schools. He's, as far as I know, he's still there. I know he's at least been a significant factor in raising at least one school over there. But their resources are still quite limited. Like you were mentioning with your experience, you never got the opportunity to dissect a pig, for example, like I did. That's a pretty large animal. And, you know, if we were able to give them even just one set of virtual goggles for a class of 30, I'm sure that they could make that work. And it would benefit them in ways that I honestly couldn't even imagine. I mean, I'm so lucky to have been born in the United States that I really can't imagine what sort of impact that would have on them. Not only, you know, obviously for their education, but just personally to be able to experience something like that. That's a good point.
And the thing about it is, you know, the technology is changing so rapidly. I mean, there's this cardboard thing that you can buy and you just fold it and you put the lenses in the middle and you just put a cell phone on the front of it. So it's like, you know, that Samsung Gear VR that I have, but a hell of a lot cheaper. And, you know, it's not as good because it has to rely a lot on the internals of the cell phone and all that. And it's only as good as the cell phone. But it still provides you a level of that. So the technology is going to get cheaper and more accessible. You know, in 20 years, you know, this stuff is going to be just so ubiquitous, in my opinion. Because it has a lot of other applications as well. I'm pretty sure that even in the poor countries, almost everybody will be able to afford it. I don't see a problem with that. And since we're talking, you know, 20 years, like today, there's still a big, you know, it's cost prohibitive for poor areas, but in 20 years, not a problem.
Okay. Well, what about other forms of technology? I mean, your best guess, either of you, it doesn't matter. Where do you see the state of technology in 20 years?
Well, I mean, technology always advances, you know, and this was kind of the next thing that I was going to move into anyway, just with the virtual reality type stuff. Because, you know, imagine a lot of people at their work, you know, they have a computer and a lot of people have 2, maybe 3 monitors because they have to be able to switch between screens or, you know, especially for engineers or for drafting or for designing things, you know, people that do art on the computers, you know, they have 2, 3 monitors open. But now imagine if all that is virtual, you know, all you have is just your 3D virtual reality set, whatever it may be, and you have your virtual instruments, or, you know, you have 2, 3, 4 different pieces of software all running. You know, maybe have some text editor on the left, you have a spreadsheet editor on the right, you have some graphical thing on the bottom, you know, you have a communication with another person on the bottom right, and, you know, all that, all, you know, 3, 4, 5 screens are all right there in the field of view. You just look at it and it's there in high definition, and, you know, you're just manipulating some joysticks or a keyboard, and you're doing all your work, drafting, designing, drawing, data entry, you know, all that with just one single device.
I'm going to be super optimistic. This is like a best case scenario in my mind. What do you think it's possible? I'll frame it this way. Actually, do you think it's possible that the technology by 20 years now could be refined to the point where it's, say, instead of having goggles, it's a contact lens, and if you want to do certain things, you just do motions with your hands or voice commands? Things. I mean,
they're already.
Think it would get refined to that extent?
They're already working on some of that kind of stuff, you know, where there's some some minor prototype of contact lenses that may do that. But all you have to look at is the Google Glasses, or they're not a virtual reality thing. It's more of, I think, probably better referred to as augmented reality. So you see through it, and it just adds content on top of what you already see. So these things are probably going to eventually merge. So it may look just like a regular pair of glasses, or it may even be contacts. Yeah, it definitely could. Now with that, awesome. I don't know how you could power it. I just don't see a way to power it. That's my only thing. And I don't know how they would solve it even in 20 years.
Okay. What about this then? My wife can charge her phone wirelessly. Do you think the technology could be applied to the contact lens? Even Tesla theorized such technology.
Yeah. Well, the wireless charging that we have today is very different from what Tesla was thinking. The underlying principles are the same, but it's not really the same thing that he was thinking. But yeah, I suppose it could be. Although, so I guess in that case, there wouldn't really be like a battery that's built in on there. It'll be like a constant stream of power to the lenses. And
that'd be cool.
Yeah, I suppose that is very much possible.
All right. Well, what about you, Chris? What do you see in the future, 20 years from now? Doesn't necessarily have to be technology. What's on your mind?
I just see a lot of technology becoming more cybernetic in nature. So mixing
is this something
biology.
That you desire? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, mixing biology with technology is really the future, because of the fact that you run into problems like, hey, how are we going to power this? Well, hey, what's the most convenient way to power it? Biology. It's not hard to figure out. So, yeah, wireless stuff is great, but honestly, what's better than just using our own energy to power such augmentations for our own abilities?
Yeah, and you absolutely could. For example, there is a way to generate electricity based on a temperature difference. So your eyeballs are probably going to be a little bit warmer than the ambient air. And if you could make the technology efficient enough, you could use that temperature difference to power your virtual reality, contact lenses.
That makes sense to me.
It's how my arc reactor works. I built a primitive prototype of an arc reactor that's self-powered because of the fact that it relies upon a temperature differential between a flask of ice-cold water and my chest.
Okay, I have no idea what that is, but it sounds very cool.
Yeah, no,
like,
so...
You mean like Tony Stark's arc reactor?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
I'm just building the housing for it, but yeah, it's just a ring of light, a string of LED lights that are put into a ring, and the string of lights is powered by the temperature differential between my chest, where it's contacting the plate, and on the other side of the plate is a flask of ice cold water, and that temperature differential by itself, along with the Peltier chip, basically ends up powering the lights as long as there's a sufficient differential in temperature.
Wow, that's amazing. See, I remember being fascinated by mundane versions of this technology, like or variations on it. Like, for example, the watches that you wear that power themselves just from your motion, or I have a toy essentially that's just this windmill that it's black on one side and white on the other, and when the light hits it, it propels it just from the power of light and heat. And those to me were fascinating and still are. And what you're describing is just kind of mind-blowing, to be honest with you. And you're building this in your garage?
Yeah, my bedroom. Yeah.
That is cool.
There's a lot of cool tech coming, especially in energy type devices. I was recently, and that's actually another part of technology that's going to revolutionize just the way we live over the next 20 years is solar power. Now, when I say solar power, people think giant, bulky solar arrays on top of their house or in like fields. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the big solar arrays where you just have like this grass field or something and it's just covered in big solar panels. Or I think that's yesterday's technology. I was reading about this new material called perovskite. I think it's a crystal of some kind. And the cool thing about it is you can deposit it in liquid form, and then as it dries up, it forms basically a solar cell. And now they haven't gotten the efficiency quite to where the efficiency of the what's called silicon solar cells are today. These are your top of the line efficiency solar panels you can get are probably about 25-26% efficient. These perovskite type devices have actually cracked the 20% mark, so they're getting right up there. And if you can as easily deposit them as, say, painting or spraying or something along those lines, just imagine how that would transform the world. Any surface can now become power generating. You park your car under the hot summer, it charges itself. You paint your house with this special paint, and you no longer have to be connected to the grid.
That's really interesting. Now, I don't know very much about this particular field. I do know that one of the problems that we're running into now, or not really a problem per se, but one of the innovations that we're really striving at are innovations in energy storage. If you have solar power, you have to have a contingency for a long, cloudy month or something. So you need to be able to store energy for in case of emergency. And I've heard a lot of really ingenious solutions to this problem. There's a solar plant that exists somewhere out there. You'll have to fact check me on this one, guys. But there's a solar plant out there somewhere that stores its energy, its excess energy, by using that excess energy to pump water up a silo. And so long as there's excess energy, there's going to be water being pumped up. And once the excess energy stops coming in, the water stops. There's a door that keeps the water from going anywhere. And when they need more energy, they release the water, and the water spins a turbine that creates energy the old-fashioned way. So it's very almost rudimentary way to store energy, but it's actually quite efficient from what I gather. And I'm slightly concerned that we're going to be falling far behind in this field. To name drop somebody, Bill Nye. I remember watching an interview with him where he was on, I think it was Fox, and he was trying to convey to the world that we need to teach our future generations to be engineers. We need to build things like a better battery, and that quote specifically, a better battery. These are the waves of the future. And lo and behold, not even, I think, a month or two ago, I remember hearing on the news that China has developed the world's most efficient battery. And they're continuing to create these innovative green technologies, which those are the wave of the future, obviously. Solar technology. To me, I worry that China is going to dominate in this area. And if this area becomes efficient enough, obviously it has the potential to hopefully replace fossil fuel and coal. So if the world doesn't need fossil fuel and coal, and we're behind China on this technology, then China is essentially going to be controlling the power supply. Now, that's admittedly a little bit conspiracy theory, but it's a possibility that I think is worth being concerned about. And I agree with Bill Nye on this one, that we need to have future generations that have the capacity to be innovators world leaders in these new developing innovations and technologies. Otherwise, I see the future being where we might not necessarily have the level of control and power that we do today.
Well, believe me, there's nothing conspiracy theorish about what you're saying. I mean, the Chinese government being a very, very centralized source of power is putting a lot of resources into these new technologies, and they're pouring money into those things, into manufacturing, into development of some of this stuff, and they want to push us away as the leader in technology. And if we don't invest into some of these new technologies that we'll need to develop over the next 20 years, we're going to go behind. And as you said, some of the new technologies may not be anything cutting edge. I mean, you were saying pumping water. There's another alternative where we basically put trains on tracks and we load them with really heavy stuff and just push them up a mountain, and as we need energy, they start rolling down the mountain and generating instead of eating power as they're going up. So there's quite a few different ways to store energy, but everybody's developing them, and we definitely need to invest invest in those new technologies. Otherwise we're going to go behind,
and that's why I worry, because we don't, as a country, we're not particularly motivated to develop these technologies at the moment. We have people who aren't particularly concerned about developing green technologies, and Trump's obviously one of them. We have people who would rather invest into coal, and Trump is obviously one of them. And the whole world is invested in fossil fuel, and Trump, and he's no exception. The rest of the world is still interested in these things. But I think that his approach, and the approach of anyone who agrees with him, is backward, plain and simple. And unfortunately, that's the direction we're heading right now because Trump's in charge.
Yeah, science denial is going to be the death of any country over the next 20 years. The economic death, I mean, not anything else. If you don't develop your science, if you don't educate your people, if you don't accept scientific facts such as global warming and all these other things over the next 20 years, you're going to suffer. Other countries are going to come and eat your lunch.
Yeah.
They're going to try really, really hard.
Well, from Trump's own mouth, the Paris Agreement was apparently a bad deal. So we just needed to back out of it and renegotiate something, or just do our own thing. According to Trump, the Chinese are just going to sit here and build hundreds and thousands of coal plants willy-nilly and not have to adhere to anything, and yet somehow China is leading the way in green energy. So
of course
I don't know how both of those statements can be true, but whatever. And then he's simultaneously cutting the budgets on every single scientific endeavor in this country, which also is going to stunt growth in every single way, shape, and form. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. This country is a little hampered, and China is a little bolstered, and so yeah, he's kind of setting us up for failure along the way.
What do you think, Chris? Do you honestly see an economic power shift in the foreseeable future, or do you think that hopefully future presidents will fix this problem?
I think that I hope that I'm going to receive a positive note back from France, because France is accepting applications for people to move to their country.
Wow.
Most notably people who are in this country, since Trump has made it clear that he doesn't want educated people and researchers to be here in this country. So France is offering full 4-year scholarships, so to speak, to people to move to their country and take up various job positions in advancing the human endeavor that is science and research and education. And yeah, I just finished
That's
filling out that application tonight, so that'll be fun.
Oh,
that's
you're
actually
actually
really
doing that.
spooky
Wow.
too. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll
Well,
see how well that goes. But,
see, I don't honestly know how to feel about that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish you well on anything and any decision that you make. Personally, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. But you know, you were saying that France is offering scientists in particular the opportunity to move to their country with some significant benefits, and that is actually pretty spooky to me. I remember I was watching have you guys ever heard of Big Think? It's a YouTube channel where they interview.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to slaughter this man's name, but he's a well-known theoretical physicist. I think it's Michio Kaku, something like that.
That's all right.
And he was saying that the one thing that keeps America on top is our ability to export technology. And the one thing that keeps us exporting technology is the fact that we have a program set up in this country, which encourages people from other countries to come here to do science.
Right.
Specifically. And it's this one program, essentially, which has propelled us for decades now, as far as I'm aware. And Chris was just saying that Trump is cutting budgets to every single scientific endeavor in this country. And that is incredibly scary to me. When you do the math, that all equates to what we were just talking about, our economic failure.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the technologies that are going to emerge over the next 20 years are going to be financed by agencies like DARPA, agencies like the National Science Foundation, the national laboratories. We're just talking about energy development. I think it was the Argonne Labs. They were doing a lot of the energy development of the future. DARPA is developing a lot of those, new energy type technologies. And, if we cut those budgets, why would those, people from other countries come to develop these technologies here? I mean, if you think about the U.S. economy over the last 100 years, and probably more than that, has been so good precisely because here is where a lot of new technology was developed. Computers, airplanes, all this type stuff. It was developed here and in Europe. And, this allowed our economy to progress. Something like 1/2 of all the scientific papers of the world are published in the United States. I mean, that's insane, right? And if we cut those budgets and we stop publishing those papers, those scientists are not going to come. Those technologies are not going to get developed, or at least they're not going to get developed here. Other countries, their economies are improving. They'll be able to develop that stuff. China, India, Brazil, all those other countries are going to invest in that stuff, and it's going to be invented there, and they're going to reap the benefits.
Well, I mean, you could really, break it down to, simple fact. I mean, most of the scientists I can think of in my head right now aren't American-born scientists. I mean, you can even go all the way back to, I don't know if this applies, but you can even go all the way back to Einstein. He wasn't born in America. He's one of the most influential people in history, but he came to the United States to make that happen, essentially. And why the United States? Why not Paris or some other country? I honestly don't know. Again, I don't know if his case applies, but as far as I'm aware, this program that Michio Kaku was referring to is this motivator that keeps these people coming to our country to do this. I'm pretty sure that he had said that some very significant portion of the scientists in this country are actually foreign-born because of this particular program. You get rid of that program or cut its funding significantly, and there you go. So.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why people come to the United States is because there are opportunities here, because here is the place where you can grow, when you can invent, where you can do stuff. And, but, a lot of the inventions that have allowed the big tech companies to develop stuff has come out of government-funded research. I mean, think about the internet. Think about all the head-up displays that are in cars. Those were first developed by the military. LCD displays, first they showed up in airplanes and things like that, where you're space constrained, you need lightweight stuff. A lot of the developments, battery technology, solar cells, all that stuff is coming out of universities. People, professors develop this stuff in joint ventures with, companies out there. And if you cut those budgets, you're not going to develop those technologies, and your economy is going to suffer. But let's get back on the topic of actually predicting the future. Enough with the grim realities that we have to face with science denying administration governing us.
Sorry, brother, but I my vision of the future right now is admittedly pessimistic. I'm sorry, but
no,
I
didn't mean. There's good reason for it.
I just think
so where did you want to go?
Country. No, that's what I was going to say. I think whatever country I'm going to live in is going to be the greatest country. No ego at all in that statement.
No, not at all. Not at all. I didn't feel that. Well, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about electric cars. Okay, I think that's going to be one of the big things that's going to develop over the next 20 years. Has any of you guys been in an electric car, been driven, any of that?
Can't say I have, actually.
Yeah. Chris, any electric car experience?
The only electric car experience I had was walking back from Old Crown one day and seeing a Karma parked outside of Firefly.
Okay.
I did not know what a Karma was, and it was very strange to see one in person, but that is the first time I've ever seen a solar panel on the roof of a car in my entire life.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. Not bad for a $130,000 car.
Wow. Yeah, at that kind of price, you would expect a few bells and whistles, right?
Yeah.
Now, one thing that's really cool, and my brother-in-law actually has a Nissan Leaf, and man, that thing, yeah, it's kind of slow, it's kind of ugly, it's kind of weird looking, but it is really nice. You get in it, you press a button, it's completely silent, has very good acceleration, doesn't use any gasoline. Sure, it only has limited range right now, but my brother-in-law is an a mechanical engineer, and he's a total gearhead. He used to work on cars, adding turbochargers to them, doing weird things, making 100 horsepower car become 300 horsepower car, stuff like that. And he is in love with his electric vehicle. Okay. He loves it. He has to hardly do any maintenance on it. It's much cheaper to operate. Even with the limited range that it has of less than 100 miles, he loves it. And I think that's, I've read some predictions that people have made that only maybe 10 or 20% of cars will be electric in 20 years. But I'm calling it today. You can record me, and I am making a bet. I will buy steak dinner to the first 5 people that contact me if my prediction that I'm going to make right now doesn't happen. But I think in 20 years, 90% of cars that are sold brand new will be electric. I am absolutely certain of it. 20 years, I am calling it.
I think it's a very optimistic figure. Cars sold, I would put the figure myself around 60 to 70 at best. but that's only because, like you were mentioning, it's quite limited in its capacity, and it's going to continue to be for a while. I mean, we already know that China's developing amazing batteries, so maybe in the future this isn't going to be as significant of a problem. I mean, who knows? We could come with, or anybody might come up with a major breakthrough in energy storage that might make a vehicle like this be able to go from here to California in 2 charges. It's possible. I mean, especially if they start incorporating some of these amazing green technologies which are being invested in right now, which could significantly impact the future. My favorite personally being the solar powered roads. I think that idea is fantastic. I hope that in 20 years, at least 1% of the road that is being put down into the earth in this country will be solar powered roads by that point. And that's a small figure, but the amount that's being invested into it right now is pretty minuscule. But the potential for it is amazing. It's already set up as a power grid, so you don't have to do anything really to that. And you can do other things with the road. You could put features into the road itself, such as being able to digitally put the lines on the road. So if need be, you could, instead of having construction workers come out there, 45 minutes after an accident, a police officer that arrives on scene could call the city and suggest something like this and get it done in maybe 5-10 minutes. So something like that could significantly improve road conditions. They're running obviously into a problem right now with traction, especially during the wintertime. That's really the obvious impede there. But they're making significant breakthroughs, and this is what I'm hoping is the way of the future here. And if we could make solar-powered roads like this, we could have emergency charge stations on the highways, things like that for your electric cars, so then electric cars become more feasible. Or they don't even have to be emergency. They could just be, just instead of having whole gas stations, you could just have posts every 10 miles and people pay, $10 to charge their car for 10 minutes or whatever. I think something like that is feasible. So I think if we were able to combine all of these technologies, I could see optimistically, if this stuff becomes incorporated, this really impacting us in ways that we really can't even imagine. Like I was mentioning before, like just to the fact that the roads won't be as congested for 40 minutes as opposed to 10. That alone could significantly impact our economy, the general, I don't know how they phrase it, the happiness index. I don't know what that's called.
Oh, sure.
Excuse me. But, just things like this, things along these lines. Air will be cleaner because the cars will be electric. All of these factors would come into play. And these are the things that we need to focus on. And not to backtrack, but, again, Trump's not focused on these things. We need to be focused on these things, people. These are the ways of the future. These are where I'm hoping the future goes.
Yeah, so let me put some data behind some of the stuff. Obviously, a large limitation of electric cars, and it will continue to be a large limitation over the next 20 years, are the batteries. But there's a lot of optimism. I was looking at this price chart from Tesla, and in the year 2013, the Tesla battery packs cost just a smidgen under $600 per kilowatt hour. Now, in the newest, latest, and greatest Tesla Model S, the biggest battery you can get is 100 kilowatt hours. So in 2013, a 100 kilowatt hour battery at that technology would have cost $60,000. That's a lot, right? Today, that cost is $273 per kilowatt hour. So the technology in only 4 years has dropped by half. And according to Elon Musk, here in the next couple of years, the price per kilowatt hour is going to go down to $160 per kilowatt hour. And furthermore, within 10 years, he thinks that the price is going to be down to $100. So that would be in the span of 10 years, the price of batteries, or maybe a little over 10 years, would have fallen by if my math doesn't. Well, anyways, it would have fallen 6 times. From 600 to $100 per kilowatt hour. So I think at that point in time, electric cars are going to become very, very compelling. I mean, I don't see a reason why anybody would want cars with internal combustion engines at those.
Well, that plus the cost of electricity is the most reliable utility cost that we have ever had. The cost of electricity in the last 60 years, I think, has only gone up like 10 or 15 cents per kilowatt or something. It's some petty, minuscule amount because they're not, charging you ridiculous middleman prices like the oils and things. Plus all the other added costs. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, to be honest with you, but the kilowatt hours for the electricity that power your house, the cost of that in the last 60 years has only gone up 10 or 15 cents. That's it.
It hasn't changed much. I'm not entirely certain, but you use a lot of those kilowatt hours. So that 10, 15 cents is a lot. But, here's the thing, right? When you drive an electric car, if you look at some of the estimates of what it costs you per mile, it's as if you're driving a car that gives you like 110 miles per gallon. There is no way to get that out of an internal combustion engine. Now, another thing that you have to consider is you have almost zero maintenance on an electric vehicle. There's no oil to change. Your brake pads are not going to wear out because you're stopping your car with the electric engine. There's a lot of other things in there that are just not going to be wearing out. I mean, repairing, there's less moving parts to repair. An internal combustion engine has valves. It has pistons that move. It has all kinds of shafts and bearings and pumps to move water and coolants and this and that. None of that, or very little of it, exists in an electric engine. So some of the maintenance costs are going to be a lot lower, so that needs to be factored in. Some of the, let's not forget one of the elephants in the room over the next 20 years. That's going to happen just with transportation is self-driving technology as well. So, electric cars are a lot easier to convert to self-driving cars because the entire system is electric, control is better. Have you guys read much in terms of, self-driving cars maybe?
Unfortunately, no.
No?
I mean, the only information that I get on this are just random knickknacks that come up from time to time. I look at the new thing, or occasionally it's this is happening right now. Like, for example, there's a whole fleet of these huge trucks, these huge dump trucks somewhere. I mean, massive ones, and they're all automated. There's no driver in any of them, and there's like a whole fleet of them constantly moving. And that kind of blew me away. I mean, these things are huge, like the size of my house, huge.
Yeah.
And there's not a driver behind them. And there's a caravan of these things constantly going in and out of this construction area.
Interesting. Chris, any thoughts on self-driving technology?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I just know that the technology is getting better, and I can't wait to have a car that drives itself because I hate driving.
Oh yeah, no, it's a pain, right? Especially if you live in a. I mean, it's not so bad in Fort Wayne, but if you live in a big city, people in LA sometimes spend like 2 hours, driving to and from work. I mean, it's ridiculous, right?
And look at all that lost productivity.
Oh,
I mean,
of course.
if you had full, I mean, you could put a desk on your back seat and just be at work essentially on your way to work if need be. Big corporate companies, pretty much any company really, could benefit from this. I mean, if you're having a meeting and you're running late because of traffic, 2-hour traffic in LA, just have the meeting in your car. I mean, everybody has Skype these days.
Hey, put on your VR goggles inside of your electric self-driving car. You'll be in a virtual meeting, so you'll be productive. See how all those technologies combine. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Then we
I
just
mean-
need holograms to project your physical presence into the room, and vice versa.
Of course. Yeah.
I
I mean, you have your
hope that's
avatar.
inevitable. God, man, I've been fantasizing about hologram technology my entire life. I honestly
virtual
doubt
reality
that I'll
is
ever
gonna make
see
that
anything like what I imagine in my head. Well, it's kind of. I don't know. To me, it's not the same thing as the big Emperor head in Star Wars. To be able to put your hand through it in real time in the real world where everyone else could see it. I mean, I don't know. Something about wearing goggles cheapens it to me somehow.
Yeah.
Call me petty. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, but to the point though of self-driving cars and stuff. So imagine you have your electric car. Now your battery costs $5,000 or $6,000 in 20 years, or maybe 10. So that could potentially make your car only cost $20,000-$25,000, which is in line with what a regular car costs. You add the self-driving technology where cars could literally drive bumper to bumper at the same speed, because they'll be able to communicate with one another, decide on the speed that everybody's going to move with, and we all start going at the same time. That alone will clear up traffic, so you won't spend an hour going back and forth. And even if you do, you'll be able to be productive. Now, of course, all these technologies um, are also going to have a huge impact on our economy. I mean, just imagine what self-driving cars will do. And if you add self-driving trucks, I mean, you have 3 million truck drivers on the road. We're talking in 20 years, all those people be laid off because the trucks are going to deliver freight from point A to point B on their own. Design work is going to be done on a computer, so it's going to be much faster. So you're going to need less designers. 3D technology you're going to be able to, your computer is going to build everything that you want with a 3D printer out of metal, plastic, whatever you want. So machinists, people that build stuff are going to be needed less. So 20 years from now, I think the work environment is going to look a hell of a lot different from what we have today.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait till we, start saying driving is the safest way to travel. I mean, that'd be great. I'm right there with you, man. As far as jobs go, I don't know. I've had this conversation a little bit, and only amongst friends, really. But I kind of wonder if the gain in productivity, the potential gain in productivity from being able to work in your car or do things in your car in general. I mean, even schoolwork on your way to school, for example, if you want to go that far. Right. I'm wondering if it's possible that gain could compensate for the loss of drivers, for example.
That is all the time we have for you this week. This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Be sure to check out FreeThought Fort Wayne on Facebook and on meetup.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope your days are filled with logic, reasoning, and the eternal quest for knowledge.
A little bit. And